This is episode 262 of the Reel Me In, a movie podcast. Chase and Joel will take a look at the first film to be released in 2019, Escape Room. Joel's going to have his Oscar corner, and then, of course, Chase might talk about some trailers here and there. All that more on today's Reel Me In. What is going on, everybody, and welcome to Reel Me In, a movie podcast. I am Chase Lee, one of your co-hosts, and hey, listen, if you're looking on the interwebs for another movie podcast, look no further. Hopefully, you can stick around and listen to our silly opinions, and you can kind of join in the conversation and, tweet at us that we're wrong and all that stuff. It's just a fun, interactive thing, and we always like you guys listening. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. But if you are new, what we'll typically do is I'll start with some trailers, and then I'll throw it over to Joel, where he'll talk about some news, maybe some Oscar stuff, a little bit more kind of his spin on the news. And then, of course, we'll have our joint reviews of the movie coming out on the weekend. And then, that's it, because we're changing up this year. And then we might have some extra stuff like we do this week, but we'll let you guys know up at the top what the new stuff is. But this is episode 262, and I am not joined alone to talk about Escape Room, because as we all know, the first week in each new year, it has to be like some type of horror film. That's just the rule of law in Hollywood, and I know Joel is super excited to talk about that movie. So, Joel, do you feel like you have risen back from the dead after recording 3 in a row, or like how are you feeling? Has your throat given you a 2-week notice? Has it left? Like, did it find a new job? Like, what's going on with that situation?
It definitely threatened me with just it wanted to go on strike. It was,
okay. I was just making sure.
No, it was cleansing, because what we were able to do is cap off the year and then kind of pave the way for a new year. And with a new year, even if, like you said, we get a new horror movie, either in the first week or pretty close to it, certainly in the first couple of weeks, it just feels like a clean slate, and it's really nice. I'm excited to get into this year in particular. Is just, we've talked about it. It's going to be insane. Every week, pretty much, except for some of the early ones, we'll have a major significant release that we're talking about. So it's exciting for sure. And I'm excited to get into it for sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things to where you just kind of like, you feel like you have had this whole year just bogged down on you, which was 2018. You wake up, the sun has risen, birds are chirping, and you just feel better about yourself. Yeah, it's really funny. Like, after when you record 3 podcasts, you kind of just want to go sleep and hibernate for a while. And even going to see Escape Room on Wednesday, I was still exhausted. I was like, man, I wanted to take like a even longer break from movies, but we just don't do that here. We talk about them for you guys, and I'm excited to get back into it. So let's talk about some trailers that dropped. Oh, excuse me, mark that S off, because a trailer just dropped this week. Just like with the news, kind of a little light in the Hollywood space. But I should mention that before I get to the main trailer and the only trailer this week, there were several indie trailers that dropped, and it looked like, movies that were made for like $20. And the movie I'm going to be talking about is an independent film itself, but it's more on a little bit of a bigger scale. That's actually going to have a release in theaters, so to speak. Most of those ones that came out this week are primarily VOD. Some of them might have a limited release in 2 theaters, but that's not enough really for us to talk about. But before I get into the main trailer, Netflix always loves to drop some stuff on us, and both of them were basically date announcements. So I'm not going to really go into the Punisher trailer, but that one kind of dropped this week, letting you guys know that it comes out on January 18th for season 2. I watched the first few episodes. I like the show. Maybe I'll get back into it once I finish Daredevil season 3, but just to let you guys know, January 18th. And the big one on New Year's Day, I know this is actually one that Joel and I are both excited for, because Joel's not even much of a TV guy, let alone a streaming guy, but Stranger Things 3 drops on July 4th of this year, so that should be quite tasty. So can't wait for that. So the main trailer, only trailer that dropped this week, is starring Mads Mikkelsen, and this one is Arctic. I had to say that word over and over again before we recorded because I kept saying Arctic, but it's Arctic, and it's one of those words I will never ever be able to say not slow. So this one stars Mads Mikkelsen as a lone survivor of a plane crash. He's also with someone. So as far as we know, there's only two people in the film. The other person is injured, and so he has to make serious decisions each day because, you know, the weather in that type of setting is usually blizzards. It's super cold outside, so he has to go out and get food. Maybe does he go get help? Like, what does he do in order to take care of not only himself but the passenger that's on this crashed plane? And so, you know, the movie kind of starts out with him kind of fishing for some fish underneath the ice, and you know, he's just kind of walking around. And then as the trailer goes, it just keeps amping up with tension, and the color palette's mostly blue and white, and it feels really frigid as you're watching it, which is really great because you feel really cold as well as the main character, so it kind of gets you into the atmosphere of the film. I just think as a survival film trailer, it does its job. It sets up a little premise. It literally just shows you there's two people here in this setting surviving for an hour and a half, and then it just ramps up with some really excellent tension and some great trailer editing to where when the title actually came up, you were kind of breathless because you were like, wow, that was just that was like holding in your breath for, you know, a minute and a half and 2 minutes and just finally releasing. So as a trailer, I thought it was really, really well handled. Here is the funny part, though. I didn't know the people behind it until you start looking into it, but it's directed and co-written by Joe Pinna. Now, you're probably wondering, like, who is this guy? The name sounds familiar, right? So you look into it. He is the mystery guitar man on YouTube, and he has made a bunch of shorts, and he's directed some TV internet episodes. This is his first like full-length feature, and it looks like a professional did this. And so I was actually kind of shocked that he and his co-writer, who was like an editor and a writer and stuff on all of his shorts, it's like these two guys come from the internet and they were able to make something like this and get something like a Mads Mikkelsen. That's incredible, man. So yeah, in the vein of like 127 hours and even something like The Grey or recent ones like All Is Lost, it just looks like it's going to rank up there as one of the better ones of the decade. So I can't wait for it. Joel, from the description of it and knowing who's in it and, you know, being a survival film, is this something that tickles the fancy?
Yeah, it sounds really interesting. Pretty impressive that this is kind of their breakthrough from the internet. It isn't what you'd expect. I'd expect some like relationship drama, something like very, very small scale. You just expect that to be. I mean, maybe we shouldn't expect that to be apparently, but yeah, I mean, to get Mads Mikkelsen, particularly where his star is at right now with Hannibal and being in, you know, Marvel and Star Wars recently, that would be around the time that he would have had to be considered for this and be talked to. I mean, it's pretty impressive. So yeah, certainly interested.
Yeah, I mean that was it for the trailers, so we can just kind of bleed right into it. Sorry guys, there's really nothing else to talk about.
All right, guys. Well, before I get to the news, there's no news. Nothing really happened this week. It's the beginning of the year. I'm sure that a bunch of people who would announce stuff and write press releases are on vacation and probably preparing stuff for the next week, but it didn't happen this week. So there's no news. But before I get into my Oscar beat, which is talking about the supporting acting categories, I wanted to kind of expound upon what Chase was talking about with the extra stuff. So, as everybody knows, this is the last year of a decade, that decade being the 2010s. And so that means that, you know, in about a year's time, we've got at least a plan to do something regarding the best movies of the decade. And I was actually talking to Chase about this a while ago. Even if I hadn't joined the show, y'all would probably expect that from him. And I'm sure that he would have probably done something to that effect. So it was going to happen either way. I feel like what we need to do is build up to it a little bit. And, sort of the thing is, though, I've only been a part of the show for less than 2 years. And so while y'all know my top fives, or if you can't remember them, can hear my top fives of, for instance, 2018 and 2017, you can listen to those episodes that we did with Mark. But, you don't know mine for beyond that. And that includes years like 2016 through 2013, which Chase did with Jackson. And you don't know either of ours for any of the years before that. So over the course of the year, kind of slowly, we're going to be counting down some of the cream of the crop, the stuff that really rose to the top of particular years for us. It'll, take some maneuvering, particularly on Chase's part. I know he doesn't have, not to put you in the spotlight, Chase, but doesn't have really prepared, obvious lists for 2012, 11, and 10. But he'll be preparing.
It's actually true. I mean, there's no reason to feel bad, ladies and gentlemen. Before 2013, I never kept a list ever because 2013 was the first time I ever did this podcast, and that's when I started doing lists. And so, yeah, I've only been doing them for 5 years.
And you were kind of thrown into it pretty quickly because that was your 7th episode when y'all did that top 10. So
exactly. So and you got to keep in mind, I didn't start doing like critic stuff for like outlets and everything until 2013 anyway. So
yeah,
everything before that, I was just kind of doing this for fun. I didn't really take it seriously. So that's why I don't have lists for those.
Right. And it'll be fun because you probably watched a lot of stuff that now whenever you think about it, you're like, oh, wow, that would definitely be on there. That you weren't thinking about it in those terms then. Me, I've had lists kind of various throughout the years that constantly evolve. But I've gotten to the point where I'm pretty solid in what I believe to be the very best of those years. And that is the topic at hand today, in part because at the end of the show, after we review Escape Room and before we sign off, I'm going to be giving my 5 favorite films of 2016. And it's going to go by the usual thing. I'm going to just kind of run through my 5, and then, in the style that we usually do, just by myself. And then I will turn to Chase, and I will just have him quickly recap, for those who might not remember, his top 5 as of when he recorded that episode with Jackson. So then whenever we both kind of join together for 2012, we'll do the usual list structure, 5, 5, 4, 4, and so on. But yeah, I'm excited to do that because, y'all, I've many movies I've loved before, but there's a lot that I haven't talked about. So I'm really excited to kind of give some people a bigger picture of, my taste and yeah, so I'm excited to do that. All right, but before we get to that, I've got to do my Oscar beat. And this week I am talking about supporting actor and supporting actress. These are great categories because there's so much occurring in both. Supporting actor has come together quite a lot in the last few weeks, particularly as the SAG Awards got their nominees out and all of that. Golden Globes, but Golden Globes aren't really any sort of indicator of the Oscars. BFCA, all of that. So there's definitely some clear-cut contenders, and I have a feeling that honestly there might be the 5 pretty much are kind of locked in place, I think. So it's really useless, honestly, to talk about what's outside that contender circle. But if anybody squeezes in there, I have a feeling that they could be Sam Rockwell in Vice, where he plays George W. Bush. It's a pretty good performance. It's not like some really strong thing that dominates a movie, but he's good. If anything, I would honestly nominate Steve Carell over him, but whatever the case. There's also Timothée Chalamet, although Beautiful Boy kind of disappeared into the competition. It's not a very good movie. He's good in it, but it's not a very good movie around him. So he could get in on the strength of his performance, but otherwise, we're talking about a pretty significantly obvious list of contenders. Sam Elliott for A Star Is Born, particularly because of the shot of him looking backward as he drives backward as he backs out of a driveway. That's going to be his Oscar clip, and for two reasons. One, because it's great, and two, because Sam Elliott did not know what Bradley Cooper as Jackson Maine was going to say in that scene, meaning that his reaction is Sam Elliott and not the character. And that just goes to show how great Sam Elliott is. I don't know if you knew that, Chase, but that is what happened. Also, Michael B. Jordan in Black Panther. This is one that I'm really happy started showing up so strongly on the season. It's a really good movie, and he is fantastic in it. It's a great villain. Partly makes the movie, in my opinion. It's a complex villain, but even better is Jordan's performance, which really captures the complexity and the intensity of that character's politics, which are partly personal and also might constitute a pretty good point on his part. And Jordan sells all of that. It's a really good performance and has some of the best parting dialogue. If they're not afraid of spoilers, I really hope that if he is nominated, they make that scene his Oscar scene, but they probably won't. Also, Mahershala Ali, who was great in Green Book, really, really complex performance that trickily kind of it kind of toes the line of, this person who wants to shy away from, and I quote, acting black, kind of acting the part that people expect him to play because of the color of his skin. He does a lot of really, really careful work in that movie, and I greatly appreciate it. Adam Driver in Black Klansman plays a very complicated character who starts out as just kind of the Josh Larson of Film Spotting put it this way. He's basically the white face to the main character kind of playing the KKK in whiteface, which is really interesting on its own. But he's also a really complex character because he realizes that he's a target as much as the guy he's playing. And and he gives great work because he himself becomes rather desperate to keep his cover, even if he's terrified every single second, and he's got to kind of remain resolved, and it's a really great performance. But the winner, I think, and I would love this because it's not quite my own best supporting actor, but he's in my supporting acting slate, is Richard E. Grant for Can You Ever Forgive Me? One of the most delightful performances of the year of a character who, there's a lot of creative liberty done to how he fits into the story of Lee Israel. In the book, it's pretty clear that he barely factored at all into her story in real life, but it's a movie, and what he does is he takes this character who could be fairly typical, fairly functional in the narrative, and he humanizes him to such a degree, and is really funny, and really charming, and like that guy that you just want to be best friends with throughout. It's a great, great balancing act. I have a feeling he could win. He seems to be the one that everybody kind of seems, after some of the Green Book buzz died down, it kind of paved the way for Richard E. Grant to take over, and it's deserved. He's really great in the movie. So those are the supporting actor candidates. Much more kind of filled with a lot of potential here is the supporting actress category. We have two performances from the movie The Favorite to consider, Rachel Weisz and, or Weisz, however you say that, and Emma Stone. Both great performances. I personally, of those, would choose Weisz if somebody were saying who would you want to be nominated, but both deserve nominations. Both will probably get them. Definitely also could happen that one of them cancels out the other, but because that occasionally happens with two performances in one movie, we'll see if that happens this time. We also have Thomas and Harcourt Mckenzie in Leave No Trace. I don't know why, but they're kind of getting behind that performance as a supporting one, even though it makes no sense. It's usually because she's a kid actress. She's, they did this with Haley Steinfeld in True Grit, and it worked out. She was nominated. It was a fluid year. There weren't a whole lot of supporting actress candidates, so that kind of seems to be the case here. It's kind of a fuller contender pool, though, so we'll see if that happens. It could easily be that she's knocked out for Nicole Kidman in Boy Erased or Claire Foy in First Man or something, but she's the most vulnerable, but I think that she'll get in there. Certainly deserves to. It's a great performance. Also, Regina King in If Beale Street Could Talk is a fantastic performance, one of the best of the year. She's got a lot of great scenes, particularly one that she shares with Pedro Pascal that's just unreal. A sit-down conversation about roles as, kind of parental figures, and it could very well make for an Oscar clip. So we'll see. Also, absolutely terrific to me, although it doesn't seem like a lot of people are talking about this, but at least as much as some Oscar prognosticators are hoping. But Amy Adams in Vice, I thought was phenomenal. She's kind of this, not only is she Lynn Cheney and, wife of Dick Cheney, but she's also kind of the lightning rod to a lot of his most radical ideas. And she kind of is the filter for a lot of them sometimes too. And she's there to point out his place in this world that he's entered, this political arena. And I thought that she, as much as she does this a lot, is just terrific at making the character more than that. There's a lot more going on, and it's because of Amy Adams. And it could be that she wins. It could be that Regina King wins. It could be that Emma Stone wins. This category in particular is up in the air. I don't know who will win. It's probably not Thomas and Harcourt Mckenzie, but it could be any of the other four. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It could be that Emily Blunt gets in for A Quiet Place. They're going supporting on that performance too, for some reason. So we'll see. But anyway, one on the bubble get in though. Michelle Yeoh in Crazy Rich Asians as the mother. Really good performance. A lot better than kind of nagging mother roles tend to be. And maybe we'll pray to the empty void that Elizabeth Debicki gets in for Widows. I really hope that happens, but it doesn't look like it's going to happen. In any case, I feel like Regina King's at the top of this one, potentially. So, yeah, we could be looking at Regina King and Richard E. Grant. It'll be interesting. Chase, do you have any thoughts about who you want to win, or anything?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. I think Richard E. Grant. I think he's pretty much got it in terms of supporting actor. As far as actress goes, that's kind of like the stacked one this year, to where I can't even make a prediction on that.
Right.
But I love your picks. I mean, I literally, like, every one you mentioned, depending on the order of which I like better, I mean, that's pretty much my set list. So, yeah, I totally agree. Because I remember when I walked out of Can You Ever Forgive Me, I immediately said, this is the winner right here. It's like when I walked out of Whiplash in 2014, I said, J.K. Simmons, winner right there. So, and when I watched The Favorite, I felt the same way, where I was just like, I think this is like a 95% chance that this movie is going to do some damage in the actress category, whether it is main or supporting. So
yeah, we'll be talking about best actor and actress next week, and Olivia Colman's definitely going to be talked about.
Yeah,
which is kind of ridiculous to me that Colman is best actress, because the movie opens with Emma Stone and is told from her perspective mainly, but whatever categories they can get into, I want them to get into them, because those are three of the best performances of the year in that movie. And I'm a Vice guy. I in two ways. I'm for the movie Vice, And I'm also for Rachel Weisz winning supporting actress, because that's my supporting actress winner. Just personal, not based on this ballot alone, even though it is, but just my personal winner. She just blew me away in that, and somebody from the favorites got to win an Oscar. That's basically our point. All right, so that's pretty much it, guys. Join me next week for the leading acting categories. I can't wait to get into those because there's a ton happening. And in the meantime, Chase, we're already here. Let's get into our review of Escape Room. It feels weird to be already here in an episode, but that's just how it goes sometimes, guys. All right. So, Escape Room. This one comes from director Adam Robitel of Insidious: The Last Key. And this one follows a group of 6 strangers, played by Logan Miller, Taylor Russell, Deborah Ann Wall, Jay Ellis. I'm going to try to remember the other names. Nick. I don't have anything open right now, guys. Nick Dodani, I think. And then, who did I not mention? My gosh, my brain just farted. Anyway, 6 strangers get together to participate in an escape room. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with escape rooms, the concept of them is fairly simple. What you do is you follow the rules, you solve a set of riddles, and you escape from the room. If you don't, and you're given an amount of time to do that. If you don't follow the rules, you're ejected, and the clues are explained to you. If you don't solve them in time, you just lose, and the rules are explained, or the clues are explained to you. So, very clearly, right off the bat, we can understand that this is a very, very good thing to set a horror premise against, because you can tweak the circumstances to be horrifying. The dangers of breaking those rules could be genuine, and they are here. The clues could be tied to the pasts of the players, and they are here. And the employees, so to speak, overseeing it could potentially be psychopathic madmen trying to solve a point. And I guess I won't reveal whether or not they are here, but follow the math. So, very good premise. I will hand it off to Chase to do his review of Escape Room. Take it away, Chase.
Yes. So, as I stated in the intro of the episode for today, usually Hollywood just loves to grace us with its presence and say, hey, it's a new year and we are here and we are going to release a horror film. It's usually in 2 camps. It's either going to be a really kind of safe PG-13 horror film, or it's a really heavy R, gory, super sexual R-rated slasher or something of that regard. So it's really funny that you mentioned, Adam Robitel, because he directed last year's opener of the year, which was Insidious: The Last Key. Now, Joel's correct. Escape Room has the wonderful kind of golden ticket, if you will, where it has a premise that is set up beautifully for a game gone wrong, where last year we had Truth or Dare, and that tried to make that game deadly. It didn't really turn out so well. But taking a premise like this, where people are confined in one space trying to get out to go to another space, and there is death-defying traps involved, that is genius. I'm surprised no one has made this movie even sooner than we got it. So, when you watch the trailers, it looks like a fun little time at the movies. It could be something that, could be a breeze to sit through and just be like, hey, that was a interesting hour and a half. I'm going to go, do whatever now, go about my day. Or it could be a really bad experience. Now, what I have noticed in the past couple years or so from the opening movies in January, this is what I've kind of realized. You're going to fall into 2 camps with the PG-13 ones. You are going to be a bye-bye man which is an atrocious film on all filmmaking levels, but ironically enough, I remember that one the most. The one from last year, Insidious Last Key, and I'm one of the biggest supporters and the biggest fan of the Insidious franchise. Insidious Last Key was whatever. I applaud the attempt, but it just didn't really have that like staying impact as the first three. Because guess what? I actually don't remember anything that happened in that movie except that Lynch came back. So I guess it's something to kind of hold your hat to, I guess. If you're really terrible, you could be remembered easily. So, with that being said, where did Escape Room lie? Well, I'm here to report to you, it is more like Insidious Last Key, where I enjoyed it in the moment. I enjoyed it for the hour and a half I was sitting there. Yes, it has problems, but guess what? I'm going to forget it by next month. And that's just the way it's going to go. So is this one of those ones I want to rewatch over and over again? No, not even close. But you know what? I appreciate the premise of this movie, like Joel said up at top, because it does provide for some really kind of fun, creative set pieces. It provides for some slick editing here and there, and really just kind of has a nice kind of kinetic energy to it. You know, it didn't really feel monotonous to me where, you know, they set up in one room and go to the next room and the next room and the next room. It just, I don't know, just like a breath of fresh air to each room they went in. And then when you realize at the end that they're all connected to their past, I was like, okay, that's kind of some cool serial killer stuff. I don't know, it just like the whole thing around the script, you know, premise-wise and kind of story direction didn't bother me. I kind of enjoyed it for what it was. And I think Robitel really injected a lot of fun into this movie. Now, is there a lot of cheesy and corny moments? Oh, for sure. I think all the humor falls flat. And luckily, this movie doesn't pound you in the head with like stupid one-liners every 5 seconds. So luckily, you know, there is not that much. Yeah, there's some, and they're, you know, make your skin crawl. But other than that, there's really not that much like bad humor going on. Some of the lines of dialogue, obviously, are just not that good. Some of the characters are unbearable in terms of their character personalities, and you kind of just want them to go off screen. Yeah, so other than that, you know, I'll take it for what it is. I would rather watch this any day versus like a Truth or Dare or anything else, because it's not a movie that is overly ambitious. It is straight and to the point. It's a very simple story, and it actually shares a lot in common with the Final Destination franchise in terms of thematic stuff, and I actually really like that because I like the Final Destination movies for what they are. So just once again, kind of tapping into that late 90s, early 2000s type of vibe, and, you know, you can pull it off just right where you can run that thin line of going too cheesy or, you know, just enough fun to get you through. Speaking of the characters, to go on to the acting a little bit, is everyone fantastic? No, but, you know, I will say there are a couple of standouts. I think for what they were given in the material, I think Deborah Ann Woll is probably the best for what she is given in terms of her character, her backstory, how it affects her character throughout the movie, and just her overall kind of personality, that kind of hardened personality that she brings, because she kind of reminds me a lot of her character from Daredevil, and she's really good on that show, and, you know, she's pretty good in this movie. Everyone else is kind of like, they're fine. I think Tyler Labine is a breath of fresh air in anything he does. I always like seeing him in movies or television shows. You know, his kind of like bumbling personality and kind of humor works with his character, and, you know, he was just a delight to watch. I think the worst person was Jay Ellis, the one I alluded to earlier with the terrible character. He was so over the top and so hammy that it just reminded me of like old school Bond villains, and you're just like, if there was any more cheese to your character, sir, you'd be twirling that mustache. And so I didn't really care for him, but everyone else was either fine to slightly better than the rest. And then I guess to talk about, you know, the editing a little bit, here's the thing with these types of movies, with these like kind of like PG-13 kind of safe movies. I typically don't like them, but you know, if you're gonna have characters in a confined space for a long period of time, you have to have somewhat of a editing palette to make those movies watchable, because it can get boring super fast in the room. So you have to have like somewhat of decent characters and decent dialogue and decent kind of, you know, playing of the game to keep you interested as an audience member. And so I will give, you know, the editing somewhat of props in terms of the game when it's played. Cutting back to the characters' backstories is a little foggy and a little jumpy, but I still think this movie does have a nice energy to it. You know, especially if you like these kind of like slightly cheesy horror films because here's the deal, like, you know, with an idea like this, it's never going to happen. I realize that there's like haunted houses in real life that to where you can sign a waiver and stuff that can go a little bit more extreme than regular haunted houses, but you know that in real life there's no escape room like these that you see in the movie, so you can kind of suspend your disbelief a little bit and just kind of get into the entertainment aspect of the movie. And I just thought it was a fun little movie from start to finish. And the thing is, I'm not going to rate it super high. I would give it like a C on a normal day, because it's just kind of like whatever. But I'll give it that C plus just because I had way more fun than I thought I would. And yeah, I mean, there's really nothing more to say. And also the ending of the movie. If you want to get your Escape Room 2 sequel, it definitely sets one up with its ending that I didn't see coming. I was just like, because once the actual story ends, you're like, okay, cool, and then they tack on this little scene. You're like, where's this going? And then when it happens, you're like, good Lord, has no one stopped this guy yet operating these games? But yeah, just guys, I'm sure Joel hates it worse than me, but I'm just gonna say this: it is what it is. If you were asking me personally, would you recommend this movie for like full price? No. I would say the highest that I would even recommend you paying for this is matinee. To be honest with you, go watch some award-worthy movies this weekend. Go catch up on Oscar-related movies and, you know, kind of get prepared for the award season. But if you do want to go waste your time for an hour and a half with this type of movie, don't expect much, then I will say it's not a bad time. So, will I remember it next month? No. Have I remembered movies like The Bye-Bye Man more, and that was 2 years ago? Yeah. But it is what it is, so I guess you could look at it that way. Like, if it was really, really bad, it might have provoked a different reaction on me, and I probably remember it, but it's a very forgettable movie. But for the time being in the theater, it was not that bad. So, Joel, I'm scared now. Please roast me. Because you were silent, and I could feel the energy, and I was like, oh no, this kid's about to roast me big time. So, Joel, go ahead, sir.
No, I'll just buy you tickets to a really, really extreme escape room. No.
Oh, thank you. Where I'm like dangling off of a pool table upside down. Yes. Oh, that'd be fun.
There we go. That is the best room, by the way.
Yeah, the upside down bar. It's really fun.
That was fun. So, okay. In the annals of January horror movies, I think Scott Mendelson just today put it best. It's the best by default since Daybreakers back in 2010, which I think is kind of faint praise because I haven't liked anything that was released that was in the horror genre this decade, the first one of the year.
I mean, I like some of them for obviously the wrong reasons, like a Bye-Bye Man, but in terms of like good quality, no, I have not either.
Actively good movies.
Yes.
Like actual, yeah. The Bye-Bye Man was fun to make fun of.
Oh, man, it was so much fun because it was so awful.
Yeah. Of course, it's not even the worst. I think the worst is The Devil Inside.
Right, yeah. I forgot about that one.
A website advertisement. and Season of the Witch back in 2011, that was pretty bad too.
Yeah.
The one with Nicolas Cage. Yeah. So, okay. So in the annals, yeah, it's kind of automatically the best. Is that much of an endorsement? Not really. I don't think it's a very good movie, but I will say I didn't have as much fun with it and even in a general sense as you, because I think that they make a really fatal mistake on the road to that. And it's kind of fitting that you mentioned the Final Destination movies. I think that any of those except the third one would be preferable to this. Because what they do, I think, is a mistake in that they tie the clues to the past of these characters. That I think is okay. So,
well, I mean, they kind of do that with the Saw franchise.
Yeah, but there are no movies past the third Saw movie. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I didn't see past the third one. I get that. They do it in a better way though. In a far more urgent way than this.
Right.
And this movie basically, in kind of a different way, tries to. I think the difference between them and the Saw movies and the Final Destination franchise, kind of separate thoughts there, but of course the Final Destination is outright supernatural in a way that the other ones are not. But
I just want to clarify without like super spoilery. If you want to check this movie out, the reason why I make the comparison to Final Destination because it kind of deals with the theme of cheating death and being basically punished for it, essentially.
I guess, yeah, there is an element there, but I think that's where the movie's fault is, because what this movie does is it tries to introduce us to a group that must have a sense of camaraderie to escape their situation, and so instead, what the screenwriters, Bragi Schutt, who ironically enough wrote Season of the Witch, and Maria Milner, or I forgot her name, the other one. I think that what they do that's the problem is that they offer us characters who are entirely defined by their trauma, and in no other way are they important. And so it's kind of a downbeat, kind of a cruel thing that this movie puts all of them through. And I think that it rides that line of kind of exploitative, because there are some of these characters that are struggling with PTSD, and the movie, it's very clear that they are, and the movie kind of makes a punchline of that. And I had this similar problem with, weirdly enough, Insidious The Last Key, a movie that I don't like at all. I think it's worse than this one, but I think that movie kind of had a similar thing with making women victims of everything in that film. This one does kind of a similar thing by trying to up emotional stakes without earning them. And so all we have here is a big, long horror exercise that's, competently made, and it has a bit of tension here and there. I'm going to get into why it doesn't have as much as he thinks it does in a second. But, it's this big horror exercise, and then it has the scene where they all have to confront their pasts, and then you have all of them explicating their trauma through dialogue, which is the laziest way to do that. And I just think it kind of falls into some of those traps of earlier horror that maybe in other ways it's avoiding, because there are parts in this that I like. I like the upside down bar scene. I think that that's really cool, especially when they have the ceiling falling out, and that's what's the danger. It's a reversion of kind of this room that we know, and it's already clever, and then you have it raised, stories into the air, and then the ceiling starts falling away whenever the games master decides that he wants to do it, and that's really neat. It kind of ups the stakes, because they have to find out, they have to find places in an upside down room to sit on, and it's really cool. It's a conceptually clever scene. I kind of wish that was extended to the other rooms, because I think that, the first one, the waiting room, is probably the second best, the one that turns into an oven. But even in that scene, you have stupid decisions by characters that are not easily able to be explained away by, oh, it's just a January horror movie. Put it up to a little bit of a higher standard than that, and I'm not talking to you here, but just a lot of people. The first thing that anybody really does that's helpful or not helpful, but productive in some way, whether it's positive or negative, is that one of these characters turns the dial that's clearly an oven dial to 451, and because they find the Fahrenheit 451 book. It's just a bunch of it's almost kind of a bunch of characters doing dumb things to try to get out of the room, and I think that there's increasingly tired ways that the movie comes to do that. You are right though. It's not quite as conventionally paced or conventionally structured as I thought it would be, mainly because they open it up with what we think is going to be the end of the movie, which at first I thought was a lazy thing that they would just open with the end of the movie, but there is an entire section after that, where it cuts off later on.
To be fair, I was on the same wavelength as you, because once that scene replayed itself near the third act, I was like, "Oh no, is this going to be it?"
Right.
I was just like,
and
"That
it wasn't.
I would have been super angry if it ended like that.
Right, but then it just kind of ends with this series of sequel stingers and really, really dumb, like, talking killer cliches, and it's silly at the end. I don't like the entire last 20 minutes of this movie at all.
But would you expect anything less from something called Escape Room, though?
Well, I could expect slightly more.
I would give this movie a pass just because it's a movie about like killer escape rooms, to where like,
but it's not as good. I mean, we're kind of in the same boat. We're almost at the same rating. Mine's a little higher than I think I'm selling it, because it does move along fine. But I think that this idea could be like, you could use this for a genuine psychological study of desperation. Now, is that their intention? Maybe not, because they're trying to make, big horror blockbuster and all of that. And it could be released anytime. I think it would still have problems. And I think that the problem here is that they try to up, and they genuinely try to up those emotional stakes by introducing this whole thing where it's revisiting their pasts and all the clues are tied to it. It just feels like a contrivance that is hard to forgive on the evidence of what they do with the how they execute that idea. And how they do it is they have people explaining things directly to the camera. And so I think that I can expect a little bit more than that, just a little bit more than the usual thing. And it's not as bad as the usual horror movie is. Absolutely not. It's about twice as good as something like The Bye Bye Man or The Devil Inside. Definitely better than stuff like Texas Chainsaw or the Season of the Witch or whatever. But not quite as not as good as it could be, given that this is a pretty killer premise. You could use this even within the confines of a blockbuster and have two of those major aspects that I was talking about, which are the two tweaks on the circumstances, and it work. You don't have to tie this into their past. You don't need that kind of emotional burst. All you need to do is have characters who are likable, and then you have something that works, because what you've done then is put them in a desperate situation and they're likable and we want to see them escape. Here, they try to do too much with too little, and it caused me not to really care about any of them. And because they try to do that, there's something extra going on, and it doesn't follow through on that.
I guess my thought process is kind of like what you brought up with it. Is it a little like forced to like rope in like their traumatic past and a little explorative? I'm not going to disagree with you. You could look at it that way. I just look at it. It's a horror film. I suspend disbelief to where you brought up the whole desperation thing. The money thing's tied into it, and then you have these sick people that take these people that experience these trauma to force them to do this game. And I feel like that this is some weird dark web stuff that could happen. And I don't know. I mean,
horror films at their best are about desperate people. They're not just simple setups with simple solutions. The great horror, and because this movie's trying to do something more, it paints itself into a corner by not allowing itself to follow through. And
okay,
I think
fair enough.
Yeah, the very, very simple thing, and of course, you're not totally recommending this movie, so I'm not
No, I'm not saying like you need to rush out to see this.
I know that. I know
it's
that
like I
it's kind
told
of
you,
like
I'm gonna forget about the movie by we record next episode. But
yeah,
you know,
it's splitting hairs. I understand, but I do think that there's an easy way to kind of just say that this movie doesn't need to try or doesn't need to be held up to the expectations of trying something like that. I think that the movie wants to because of the fact that it has those elements in there, and I don't think that they follow through very well on that. And yeah, so it's not awful. I'm giving it a C, probably better than you're realizing, but I think that some of the performances work. I'm not with you on Jay Ellis. I think that he's the best here. I think that he is really funny and comes across as that kind of guy who knows how to work a room because that's his job. He's a financial trader and all of that, and I think that he's fun. But Deborah Ann Well's good. And they're kind of the ones. I thought Logan Miller had some solid moments, but they're kind of the only ones for me that actively did anything that.
Who irritated me the most is the fact that the movie, excluding the scene with Logan Miller, it opens up with I'm gonna call her the Hate You Give chick 2.0 because she looks exactly like Mandela Stenberg. And you know what's really interesting about her is that the movie sets her up as like this main character. But as the movie keeps going, she keeps getting like fallen by the wayside, as if like the movie forgot about her, and her character is annoying because she has this traumatic past, and she's really good at like reading books, and she's quiet, and there's really nothing more to her except like she's kind of smart sometimes, and you're like, why is this the main person we're following?
Yeah, it kind of opens up the whole like the problem of the big contrivance, which is putting these characters together. You have her, and she's the quantum physics major, and she's really smart. She's the caricature of the smart chick.
Yeah.
And I don't think Taylor Russell tries, but she's not given enough material that her performance can be anything other than she tries. And then you have, the guy who's the game expert who, of course, is exits early, let's just say.
Which, to be fair, I actually think it's a smart script move to eliminate the escape room junkie to force the other ones to kind of like figure out stuff.
It is a good joke.
Yeah,
I think it's also ultimately a joke. It's not even really a story point. It's just like the filmmakers are like, oh, there's this guy, he knows how these work, and so let's kill him off. But it is a good joke. It's funny, but of course, he was annoying. And then I thought Tyler Labine was nails on a chalkboard. I did not. I mean, he's funny when he wants to be in a movie, but in this movie, he way overdoes the whole talkative, jokey guy act. And I understand part of the thing with his character is that he's kind of using that to deflect a lot of his own trauma. But that's another problem, is that they don't go into that enough. They just, in fact, here's the big problem, and I'm wondering if you agree with me on this. Here's the big problem with the whole thing regarding the character's past, and I keep coming back to this because it's so.
Well, it's a very pivotal story element. So
it is a pivotal thing, and it doesn't get it right, and it's because, and I hate getting into spoilers. This is not a spoiler if I don't say who, but two of these characters die before we learn their pasts.
Right.
And the full picture, because we learn gradually that some of them are kind of keeping them under wraps. But two of them died before we even learned that. And so, one, there's no reason that they need to know. They just need to look at their own thing. And there's no reason we need to know unless they're just kind of contriving for us to be told through dialogue. And it's
so would you say putting the hospital room right after the waiting room would have probably been a better order then?
If they're going to try to go with those story elements, yes. But if they're going to go with the ideal version of this thing, they're not going to do the past thing at all.
Right.
Because they don't need that to have a group with camaraderie trying to escape the rooms.
Okay, so let me present something to you. If you were to make an escape room movie without that element, it would kind of be boring. Right? Like, if you didn't have some type of hook, or in this movie's eyes, a hook, wouldn't it kind of just...
The hook is the escape rooms.
That's
because
true, but you want like a theatrical kind of like movie hook, or people are
that
just
would be
going to...
the that's what I'm saying, is that would be the theatrical movie hook. I'm saying that the hook here is the premise. So, for instance, this is not a performance movie. The performances don't really matter. This is
No.
not a movie about the emotional states of characters. You don't need to have that. You just need to have immediate stakes, and the immediate stakes are there's something controlling the room. Even if they kept the silly talking killer thing at the end, which happens and it's dumb, but it's important.
It reminded me of Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget. It was great.
Pretty much. Even if you have that and you take out the past part, you have a movie that could be good with the right execution. And I think that those parts of the movie are the strongest parts of the movie. I don't think that this movie does anything all that thoughtful with taking characters who have traumatic pasts and putting them in this situation other than to put them through the ringer. And I think that that's the only reason that this movie has done that. And it's not a thoughtful way to present these characters. And, and what I mean by thoughtful is not artful or Oscar-y or whatever. It's just thoughtful. Right now, they don't seem to have been put any thought into it. And so they just kind of put them in there. They have them explain the stuff at the end, and then they try to force us to care by introducing that element far too late for us to really care. And before that, we just get flashbacks, and those flashbacks are vague. And so I think that without those, what you have is an urgent, tightly constructed thriller about characters who are stuck in a kind of a psychotically controlled escape room situation with the exact same rooms. I mean, I think that they're fun. Then you have a good movie. I don't think that they need the melodramatic emotional component that they try to force into the movie. I think that it's more than just forced. It's completely unnecessary and just kind of intrudes to me.
Well, let me throw out a movie for not only you but our listeners. I've seen this movie like 3 or 4 times throughout college just because it was on Netflix and I was like, okay, cool. And then I kept going back to it because it was a really good example of what you're kind of talking about to make this movie better. It's this movie called Exam, and it's about a group of people inside of this room, and all they're doing is just taking a test. And as the questions get harder and the moderator gets a little more fishier, like they start to realize that this is kind of like a game that they're all doing, and they're all kind of connected somehow, and they all kind of reveal their past through just straight up dialogue. No flashbacks, just straight up dialogue, but it's actually woven really like correctly into the story, and it kind of adds to the suspense level rather than taking away from it. So to what Joel's talking about, I think a good example is kind of like that movie. And so now I see your point now bringing up that movie as an example and then comparing it to like something like this,
if they're gonna convey trauma through flashbacks, then maybe just do flashbacks. Don't have a character or multiple characters in this case come on and explain stuff, because
gotcha.
It's the laziest.
So basically acts the exposition and just show, do not tell.
It's way heavy on exposition, and there's the necessary exposition of where they need to go next. That's inherent in an escape room. If the movie didn't have any exposition, it would be a problem. But if they want to include that kind of emotional component, do it in a smart way, not in a contrived, simplified way. And I think that that's the problem that this movie has. And it interrupted my ability to have fun, because I kept coming back to this weird, icky thing that they're doing with the character's past. And, okay, so I guess I'm going to slightly renege on something that I said before. You can have a good version of the movie we got. Using the components that we got, but it takes something that's really, really smart to juggle the mainstream thrills and the more thoughtful component regarding the past of the characters. And this movie has not tapped into that. And I think that there's a way to do that, certainly. But through the performances, which are mostly just functional, and through the writing, which is, very, very simple in terms of what it's trying to do, or what it does with what it's trying to do, I should say, then I think it falls short of that. It tries. It's, like I said, it's better than a lot of the other January released horror movies, but yeah, and that's sort of by accident, though. I mean, if it was released in September, I'd have the same problems. It's not just because it's released in January that I have these, but it could be the same thing. But under different circumstances, I think that a movie like this can work. I think that this movie falls short of the ideas it's trying to present, and it's definitely trying to present those. I think it's a letdown. So anyway, C for me, C plus for Chase, and we are going to move on to my extra content. All right,
Joel,
guys.
I'm not going to lie, just real quick. That was probably a lot longer than I would expected for us to talk about, but I'm glad we had this conversation.
Right, yeah. It honestly, it conjured up more thought. I think I went nearly 600 words in my review, which will be viewable by tomorrow, on this movie, and I surprised myself by doing that because I definitely didn't go this long on Insidious last year. There was less to think about there, but yeah, it was one of those, and I'm not saying like to people that it's some mind bender or whatever, but there's more to think about than you might have expected, and that I expected. So, all right, so I'm gonna go into my extra content, guys. This is my list of the best films of 2016. These are, you'll probably learn about all of my top 10 over the course of this little spiel. But I'm mainly going to be talking about those top 5. So to just kind of give you an idea of the movies that I won't be going in depth into, the other films on my top 10 included, Hell or High Water, the Western story with Jeff Bridges, Ben Foster, Chris Pine, really clean cut, expert storytelling featuring that year's best performance in my mind, Jeff Bridges. Great performance. Silence, Martin Scorsese's really thoughtful, harrowing study of faith in wartime almost, with one of the great performances in all of Scorsese's filmography from Andrew Garfield. It's a masterpiece of a performance. Krisha, really, really, really intense psychological examination of a woman's breakdown. The Handmaiden, a lot of fun. Con artist story, really graphic, kind of NC-17 rated romance that is a lot of things. Green Room, man, this movie works like clockwork. I see Patrick Stewart, Anton Yelchin's probably some of his best work in his career. Really violent, really, really down and dirty. The best film I've seen so far from Jeremy Saulnier, the director. But those make up my 10 through 6. But starting with my number 5, guys, Jackie, from director Pablo Larraín. This one follows Jackie Kennedy Onassis, however you say her name, played by Natalie Portman, in a very, very powerful performance. Follows her in the 3 days between her husband John F. Kennedy's assassination and the funeral procession, that famous one where the little boy salutes, and it's very emotional. And this is a comprehensive examination of grief. It's a really kind of fractured study of a woman's place in the world after her most famous husband has left the world, and under such heavy circumstances. It's telling that the camera mostly keeps on Jackie and on Natalie Portman's face. If Jeff Bridges was my favorite performance, I'm pretty sure Portman's a close second. There's a lot going on in that face, and it's truly, it hit me, man. I know that Chase loved this one too. It's got such such beautiful cinematography. It kind of reminds me of Terrence Malick's modern work, stuff like To the Wonder and Song to Song, but it's better than a lot of it. I think that Malick would be proud. It's similarly kind of, characters kind of whispering while montages do their thing. There's a framing device of surprising power where she's being interviewed by a reporter played by Peter Sarsgaard that really works to comment on all of the comings and goings of the main plot and of her state of mind. It is truly something else. I think that probably the best score of all of that year for me, from Mika Levy, who also did the score for Under the Skin a couple years before that, and absolutely creates something just just hypnotic, honestly, to the ears. It's really, really strong work from everybody involved, really. So yeah, number 5, Pablo Larraín's Jackie, and yes, that's how you say his last name. All right, my number 4 is a movie from a director who had a film this year that Chase and Mark, our friend Mark Dusick, were really disappointed did not make my list. That film was First Man, but at my number 4 of 2016 with a bullet is La La Land, a film that I've seen several times, and it makes a bigger impression on me every time. It's the one that Chase and I watched together. He had already seen it, but we watched it in his living room. It still worked. I've watched it on Blu-ray. I saw it in theaters. It's a great musical of the old-fashioned tradition, and features great work from Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone as he's an aspiring pianist. She's an aspiring actress. He loves jazz. She loves she's trying to make her way in Hollywood. Can't seem to quite get the right rhythm going to actually have a role that is her own, but it is truly inspiring stuff. Until, of course, all of that changes. There's a series of paradigm shifts in both of their careers at the right time for their careers, maybe not for their burgeoning relationship, but it's a considered and considerate examination of a relationship, and also, again, a great old-fashioned musical with numbers that are built on bombast but never become truly bombastic or overwhelm the senses, particularly the opening number set on a highway, and her audition number, his famous City of Stars, which turns into a fantasy sequence. It's a bunch of just great filmmaking back to back to back, on top of each other, on top of itself almost. It's ridiculously complex how this is put together. I just love this movie, and it's eminently watchable too. I could just put it on right now and have a good time. It's great stuff, and like with his other films, great last shot of two characters looking at each other and not saying anything. That's a common theme for Chazelle, and I'll get back to that idea in a couple of months. But all right, that's my number 4 is Damien Chazelle's La La Land. Number 3, I have Kenneth Lonergan's Manchester by the Sea. This thing is, to put it in the words of the Honest Trailers video, a long sad train to Sadsville, or something like that. Long depressing train to Sadsville. And it definitely is that, but it doesn't wallow in the grief of its main character, Lee, played by Casey Affleck. It does have a sense of humor in terms of how it captures its characters, particularly the character of Lee, who arrives back in his hometown after his brother's death to become the guardian of his nephew, played by Lucas Hedges. But there are reasons that he doesn't want to come home, and some of them are tied to his marriage, or his former marriage, to Michelle Williams' character, and some of them are tied to let's just say some child issues. and it's devastating. It's regular kind of it's a thing for Lonergan to study this. He's directed 2 other movies. One of them was Margaret, which I'll get to in several months on this show. And then the other one was a great film called You Can Count on Me from back in 2000 with Mark Ruffalo and Laura Linney. And it's a great film. All of them are about different things in terms of its, middle-aged white characters' problems. But I don't want to simplify that because these are portraits of loneliness and grief and all of that. It's a great film, great screenplay from Lonergan, who has an ear for the regional dialogue. It's cheerfully profane at times in that way that kind of the New Englanders are, and it has a great sense of understanding its character's grief that I thought was pretty overwhelming. We had a great screening experience with this one. We came out of it pretty high on it. I know it was right outside your top 5, so we were in the kind of the same boat. It's a great.
Joel was the only person that said as soon as he walked out, and I'm not even joking, 'cause I didn't believe him. I didn't think he had a chance, but he's like, Lucas Hedges is going to get nominated. I was like, nah, there's no way. But guess what? He did.
I'm a fortune teller, folks. So that's my number 3, Manchester by the Sea. It's a powerhouse, man. I've seen it twice. I don't know how I got through it that second time because, man, I was suddenly like weeping. I didn't do that during the first one just because you're taking it in all, but I was crying that second time. It's a powerhouse. I'm looking right at the Blu-ray right now. It's on my shelf in front of me. And so that's my number 3. My number 2 is a real oddity. It's a movie that a lot of people are alienated by its length, sort of baffled by the premise, but in any case, it's Tony Erdmann from director Marin Aid, and this one is a 3-hour comedy with a surprising amount of interpersonal tension and truth. It stars Sandra Hüller as a woman named Ellis, whose kind of basically she's visiting him, and he believes he's played. She's going to visit her father, who's played by Peter Simonashek, and he believes that she's kind of lost her sense of humor, so he wants to bring that back. And to do that, he kind of surprises her with a bunch of jokes. He dresses up in a big, gigantic bear costume at one point, sort of Chewbacca-ish, and she decides, as her big comeback to humor, that she's going to throw a naked party. I know that this sounds weird to put at my number 2 spot on a list, but the movie is honest and kind of a miracle in certain ways that this thing got conceived and made. It just feels completely raw and real in all the right moments, but it's also tremendously funny. And if you are willing to wait it out, absolutely worth the 162 minutes that it takes to get to this extended climax that just had me absolutely just glued to the screen. This thing really wowed me. I know it did not so much wow Chase, right? You saw this one, or did you?
Well, no, I never finished it. I watched.
You never finished it. Okay.
Yeah, I watched the first 20 minutes, and I just, it was just one of those times where, cool, it's 3 hours long. I fell asleep. I woke up and was like, all right, I'm gonna continue on with the next movie. But I have the screener, so I will watch it eventually.
You must. I demand it. So, I'm just kidding.
Well,
but
and they're you were on the show, right,
right?
when we reported that they were going to remake it, right?
Yeah, and I think Jack Nicholson's still involved in that, unless he fell out and I didn't know it. But pretty sure he's still involved in that. I'm sort of hesitant about that, just because there's things in here that they'll want to dumb down for an American audience. I think certainly they won't want to keep the length. For instance, I think the length is important because we are able to immerse ourselves in this relationship that is so almost kind of codependent ultimately. And I honestly have doubts that with just about any actress, they're going to be able to recapture what Sandra Hüller did. She was on my Best Actress lineup that year, and I think it's a tremendous performance because there's a lot that she's internalizing and slowly breaking down through subtle facial expressions, through a great bit involving a Whitney Houston song that is one of the scenes of the decade so far for me, and is almost immediately kind of followed by another one. But it's just a great, like really understanding film about human nature and about kind of the nature of familial relationships. It's just it's great, and I love every second of it. I thought that it earned its length, and for me, it did not feel 3 hours. I was so caught up that suddenly it was over. I was like, that was 162 minutes. But I got lost in it, and I was willing to give myself up. But there's a lot of people who resist it because of that, and I totally understand. But yeah, it's my number 2. And anyway, but guys, my number 1, my pick for the best film of 2016 is the same as Chase's, is the same as Jackson's. Without a doubt, it's Moonlight from director Barry Jenkins. I mentioned this whenever we did our top 10s. I may not have, but it's absolutely the best film of 2016. It's really no competition. It follows 3 points in the life of Chiron, played as a little boy known as Little by Alex Hibbert, as a teenager who has reclaimed his birth name by Ashton Sanders, and as an adult called Black, played by Trevante Rhodes, as he struggles with basically coming of age in the kind of the urban suburbs of Miami, in a neighborhood that will not accept him for who he is, because of a lot of sort of issues of masculinity and power and status and privilege, and it's a struggle, but he kind of comes through it on the other end. I'm a little hesitant to say that he totally comes through it on the other end. I don't know if we can say that with any sort of certainty, but to some degree he does, and it is a tremendous study of living one's truth, as the saying goes right now, and through these 3 performances that were not, kind of dependent on each other or responded toward each other in any certain way. The director kept them apart on purpose during the shoot, but they are all completely in sync, and it's because Jenkins is so adept at that human touch, whether it be the literal human touch of characters who embrace each other in this movie or give each other kind of semi baptisms almost, such as a scene between the youngest Chiron and Juan, a father figure and drug dealer in the neighborhood, played by Mahershala Ali, or kind of the wanting to avoid human touch in some cases with his mother, played in the film by Naomie Harris, the best supporting actress of that year, I think, possibly. And everything about this film is just crushing. I remember walking out stunned of our press screening that we attended almost a month before it came out, something like that.
Yeah.
And no. I think it was the week of, actually. I think it was the week of. But anyway, it was Manchester by the Sea. That was really early for us. But anyway, yeah. And I will go back to my line on it whenever we exited. And it's kind of rung true, sadly. I guess I shouldn't have laughed at that. But it was kind of ahead of its time. And it's still kind of ahead of its time. Yeah, I think it's still on that wavelength of, there's a lot of people who will resist it because of the content, and it's really sad. Brokeback Mountain kind of had that same thing happen in 2005, and just happens, and it's awful, and I hate it, but it is the best film of 2016, and spoiler alert, one of the 5 or so best films of the decade so far. It's that good. It's that confidently directed. It was my pick for the best director of 2016, even though a lot of people use that award to kind of award directors who rally troops really well, as I call it. Big productions. This was the best directing of 2016. It was the best storytelling because of how they structure it. Kind of recalled they cut to the different sections with titles, I guess. So it's not exactly like this, but there is an element of it kind of reflecting Boyhood in a certain way. Boyhood doesn't have titles separating the various years of that kid's life, but nevertheless, there is an element of that here where he's just kind of trying to make it through, and we observe that, and it's extremely observant, very quiet, very beautiful, beautiful to look at, and I love this movie. So yes, indeed, mine. If I had been on that episode, we would all have the same number one. It's not to do a spoiler of Chase's recap, but it is indeed Moonlight. So once more, 5 Jackie, 4 La La Land, 3 Manchester by the Sea, 2 Tony Erdmann, and 1 Moonlight, the best film of 2016. So Chase, remind people what your top 5 were for 2016.
All right, I'm not going to go into a long spiel, but if you guys want to hear my extensive thoughts on them, of course you can find the top 10 films of 2016 episode on the list somewhere. I mean, guys, when you do over 260 of them, it's a lot. So just scroll down and you'll find it, or just type it in, and I'm sure it will pop up. But yeah, I'm glad that Joel decided to do this, like the road to the best of the decade. I don't think any other podcast is kind of doing this, where we're going over each year within the decade, and then of course by the end of the year we'll have our top 10 in 2019, but also when we enter the new decade, really kind of put like an ultimatum list of what have been the best ones during this time period so far. So just kind of recapping all these, I think it's kind of fun, and I'm glad we're doing it. So my 10 through 6, 2 of them are actually in Joel's top 5, so that just shows you the kind of route I'm taking this one. Number 10, Zootopia. That paired with The First Wreck-It Ralph is 2 of my favorite kind of post-Tangled Disney, which is 2010. From that point on, they've been making
in-house Disney.
In-house Disney, non-Pixar films, and ever since Tangled, I've been kind of keeping an eye out on them. And Zootopia and The First Wreck-It Ralph are my 2 favorites so far. Definitely a lot more mature than most films about cities with animals in them. Number 9 is actually La La Land. I like La La Land still to this day. I still love Whiplash as my favorite. Then I'd probably go First Man, then La La Land. But I still love the hell out of this movie. I remember watching it with Joel. It was funny because I went to the screening, and then that night I got the screener in the mail. So
that's right.
Yeah, I immediately watched it again, and then of course I watched it with Joel. So I watched it multiple times, but it's just a very, very catchy musical, and when you have Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling at the helm, it's great. Hell or High Water is my number 8. Really great, kind of Western, heist thriller. It's really great all around. Number 7 is Manchester by the Sea. Great performance from Casey Affleck, a really tender type of relationship movie, and I think Lonergan's script, as you stated, is just a really kind of sweeping film with some really great scenes, and then some really potent dialogue as well. And it won the Oscar that year for that. So, and number 6 is actually Arrival. I love Arrival. It's definitely one of my favorite kind of endings of a movie this decade, where I sat there and the ending was coming at me in full force, and you're like, I was not prepared for this. Denis Villeneuve, I was not prepared for this. He's the director, and of course he did this new Blade Runner 2049. He's done Enemy, Prisoners. Definitely one of my favorite kind of directors toward. No matter what he does, I'm always on board, and he's made some of my favorite films of this decade for sure. Okay, my top 5, quick recap. Once again, inner thoughts. You can just type that into the podcast feed, and it will pop up. Number 5 is actually the same as Joel's, Jackie. phenomenal film. Natalie Portman gives one of the best in her career. I keep saying that every single time she does a movie. I said the same thing with Black Swan. I said the same thing with that one. But that's how good she is, and she is extremely undervalued. Even though she's won an Oscar for Black Swan, people still don't give her the respect that she deserves. She is one of the best in the business, and this is just another testament. I love the way the film looks. I love the grainy look to it. It looks like archive footage. Set in 2016. It's phenomenal production design and costume design. Like you said, the score is eerie, it's piercing, and really kind of accentuates the horror that she has to experience. And if you want to talk about some of the favorite shots of the decade, it's when she goes to the bathroom right after the assassination. She kind of like slowly wipes the blood off her face, realizing that she has to get back out there and like talk to people. It's haunting stuff. And so Jackie, definitely number 5. Number 4 is a documentary. I don't like ever saying this phrase because, Joel and I are still young. I'm sure we're going to see plenty of films throughout our life. But this is one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. It's Tower. If you guys have never seen Tower, please, I think it's on Netflix still. Director Keith Maitland, I believe is his name. What he does is he takes the story of the first ever kind of mass shooting, which happened at, sadly enough, in Joel and I's home state right now in Texas. It happened at University of Texas in Austin. And there was a sniper in one of the towers, and it was gunning people down. This was like in the 60s. And so the way he tells it is, yes, we had people that were actually there that day, and they're kind of telling the story as it goes. But what he does is he takes the people that are talking in the interviews, puts them in an animated kind of rotoscopy type of fashion where it's like this kind of like jumpy but also fluid animation that's gorgeous and terrifying to watch as it's kind of going, and it plays out like a fictional film. That's what's crazy about it. Like when you're watching, like, wow, this is a really good movie. But then you start to have that like sinking feeling in you because it's a real story that happened. And I think the presentation is just so creative, and it's something
and intentionally distancing, because otherwise, if we had real live recreations of this, it would just be a reenactment. And
right.
So they have this presentation of the rotoscoping and all of that. It's sort of motion capture before motion capture kind of thing that they do here is it's absolutely crucial to making the point the movie's trying to make. It's
just a great way to tell a story, and it ironically enough, I think animating it actually makes it more impactful. There's just something about seeing an animated body bleeding on the ground, knowing that what you're watching is animated, but at the same time it's real because it's based on a real life person. It's crazy how your brain works with this movie, and just I think that's just a genius idea to make it animated. And so if you've never seen Tower, for the love of everything that is holy, please watch it. It's on Netflix. I realize we have a lot of listeners that don't live in the U.S. That's totally fine. I'm hoping that it's on the Netflix servers in whatever country you hail from. That would be a real shame if it wasn't. But if it is on there, please give it a watch. Number 3. Listen, I love Prometheus, and I will stand by that. But one of the weakest aspects about that movie is Logan Marshall Green. I have never seen a quick turnaround in my life, because he is actually good in this movie I'm about to talk about, and he was good in this past year with Upgrade. And my number 3 of 2016 was The Invitation. I absolutely love this film. If you want to talk about just a really just kind of tight little thriller that might be about cult, might be about serial killer, you have no idea what it's about. It's such a great premise. You have Logan Marshall Green and his wife. They go to a dinner party. And from that point on, I don't even want to ruin it for you. Just watch it and watch the night kind of unravel in this hellish nightmare that Logan Marshall Green has to go through. And when you realize like what he's going through, and when his character realizes it is terrifying stuff, and it's just a really great kind of nightmare of a movie. And the director of it actually directed this past year with Destroyer, and I've heard nothing but great things about that, and so it's just a really well directed movie. And Logan Marshall Green with this one, and of course Upgrade, like the guy has had a complete turnaround. Because like I said, I love Prometheus to death. He is the weakest part about that movie, so that's great on him. My number 2 is a very unconventional pick because I know a lot of people don't even like this movie, but for some weird reason, I love a movie that is directed by a fashion designer. So sue me. It's Nocturnal Animals. I don't know what it is about the movie, but it reminded me so much of Mulholland Drive, and that is David Lynch. I am kind of, a little bit of a Lynch fan, and so I'm kind of biased towards that, but it kind of had that feel of like, what am I watching? Is this real? Is this kind of like a lucid dream? What am I like really watching? I think that's kind of like the fun of the mystery. It's definitely like kind of got like a murder mystery vibe. And, you see Amy Adams kind of figure out the clues to, this book as she's reading it, like what is real, what's based on my life, and it's just a really kind of nice quilt of a movie because it kind of weaves in and out of like the present, the past, the book. It's just, I don't know, it's just a very fluid movie that kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat, and definitely one of my favorite performances from Michael Shannon as the detective. So good. But then again, he's great in everything. But Nocturnal Animals, I've seen it so many times, and I can't personally tell you why I love it so much because I know so many people hate this movie. That's why it's kind of weird to have this as number 2 because number 1 is perfection, but number 2 is just a really great Lynchian light movie for sure, but I still love it nonetheless. Number 1, like Joel said, is Moonlight. I remember when we saw the movie, we turned to each other. I didn't really have that same reaction this year. I had to think on it, but it was in October. I turned to Joel and I was like, this is the best movie of the year. And, without even thinking, we had 2 more months of movie left before the Oscars and everything and before the end of the year. But I was convinced at that moment when we walked out of there, and especially after hearing Trevante Rhodes talk about it after the movie, it just confirmed my admiration even more. I was like, this is it. This is not only the best movie of the year, but one of the best coming-of-age films of the decade, is one of the best love stories of the decade, is just a powerful film, and Barry Jenkins came out swinging, and it paid off because it won Best Picture after the infamous mishap, and of course he won Best Director, and is A24's first Best Picture win. So that's also to hold a candle to. It's just great all around. I can't recommend that movie enough. So that is my top 10.
So to give some brief thoughts
yes.
on in your top 5, the 3 that I didn't mention. We talked about Nocturnal Animals. I was on that episode when you reviewed it.
Yep.
I'm not a fan. I haven't seen it again though, and that's certainly one that you got to see again to
right.
Get
just like with all David Lynch movies, even though it's not David Lynch, but it's like one of those things to where when you watch, you're like, what the hell did I just watch? And then when you watch it again, you're like, okay, I'm starting to find like an appreciation for it.
I guess I need to find that groove. Maybe it just,
right.
I don't know. Something about it was alienating on the first viewing. So I'll probably watch it again soon. We'll see. And then Tower, I already kind of had my say. That is a fascinating experience. It's just, again, that intentional distancing of the animation from the story is crucial. It sounds like it would be alienating, and it's not, because it's just it's a devastating story, and they capture that in how they present it. And it just goes to show that documentaries can be more than here's what happened, here's some people we're interviewing, that kind of basic structure. If you go out and you experiment a bit, it can really result in some gems. And The Invitation, man, Logan Marshall Green is amazing in that movie. I haven't seen it since I watched it. I was able to get a screener of that movie, and I think just before it came out from a friend of mine. But I think that I was the one who told you about that one.
Yeah, you were the one that told me about it, and then I caught it. I think I rented it before it went on Netflix. So
Okay.
I don't rarely do that, but I did it and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. The last shot of that movie
Oh, it's so good with the hill and all the houses and stuff.
Yeah,
It's really great.
it's important because it's not a cheat.
No.
It could easily be a cheat, that kind of thing. It could be, stinging a sequel, for instance, and that's not what it's doing. And it's terrifying in a closing around the throat kind of way when you realize what's going on there, and you realize the implications, and then you kind of do the math from the implications to the reality, and it's terrifying. But it's not just that; it's also an overwhelming study of grief, in a big way. There's some serious stuff going on there, particularly the baffling flashbacks that we get, and baffling I mean in a good way, just because we don't fully quite comprehend what's going on, and even though we see it, it's really a fantastic movie. And those two, Tower and the Invitation, could easily have been on my top 10 that year. It was a good year. They're both somewhere in the 11 through 15, I'm sure, because they are something special. So anyway, those are my thoughts on yours, in those top 5 that I just didn't talk about. So kind of gives people, a chance to know what I thought. And I'm going to be returning to this concept on our episode on February 2nd, to talk about the top 10 films or top 5 films, I should say, of 2015. So I'm looking forward to that. Meanwhile, that is it for this episode, folks. This has been a fun one to kind of start the year off. And I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all enjoyed the new, minus the extra content that's going to kind of look like this quite a bit, just hopefully with some news and more trailers to add to it. But alas, that's what happens at the beginning of the year. Just stuff doesn't come out, and there we go.
Don't worry, Joel. You'll get to laugh in a very cheesy villain way when the Super Bowl hits and I have to talk about all those trailers and you have no news.
I'll not laugh in a supervillain way. I'll laugh like Walter White at the end of that one episode when he's in the crawl space.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's comforting. Thank you.
Especially when you talk about Star Wars. I'm just going to lose my mind.
That's true. They're probably going to drop the first teaser.
We're going to become a horror movie about a podcast co-host who loses his mind.
Right.
All right. Well, anyway, on our next episode, we're going to be talking about The Upside. This is a new remake of the 2011 film, or 2012 film, The Untouchables. And Kevin Hart, Bryan Cranston, Nicole Kidman. I'm cautiously optimistic. We'll see what happens. And that's going to come a little later in the weekend. Chase is going to be out of town until Sunday, so y'all will get that Sunday night, and probably, or I guess more realistically, Monday morning kind of. Chase, where can people find you online?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Twitter at RealChaseLee, and of course subscribe to this podcast, whether it be on its Twitter account, Real Me In Podcast, or on Castbox, YouTube, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, wherever you're listening. Please share it around, favorite, and support the show, and spread it around, and see if we can get more people to join this nice little community that Joel and I just like being a part of every single week. And to speak on the upside, I cannot wait because with all the Kevin Hart controversy, I'm just wondering how that's going to affect box office. But we don't do box office anymore, so now I'm sad again. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I was thinking about that. I was like, ooh, this is gonna be a fun one.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's where you can find the show, and of course my personal Twitter account.
Now, I just had this thought. The Globes are Sunday, right?
Yes.
So are you doing a live show of that? I can't remember.
No, I will not. So that's actually a good. Thank you for bringing that up. I will not be doing a live coverage of the Golden Globes. It just I'm busy on Sunday, but if I want to do like a recap of the winners, I might do something by myself Monday night, or if Joel's available, we can do something really quick. But I'm not really like down to do something like permanently. So don't get your hopes up. But if there's something that pops up, then it happens.
I probably would be busy,
and that's fine. I might it just be like
I'm probably gonna have it on in the background. I'm no longer really tied to any sort of Globes thing.
Right.
I forgot what all the nominees were, and I don't really even care. I'll probably watch it like in the background while I'm writing or something.
And that's totally fine. I just want you guys to know to not look out for a live episode of the Golden Globes. That's not going to happen. Might do a recap Monday, but for sure, since it is coming up in a couple weeks, just to let you guys know, the Oscar nominations, that's always happening. And then, of course, the live coverage of that show, that will always happen. Regardless of the train wreck that we might experience this year, it's still going to happen. So, yes, look out for those.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. Well, in any case, you can find me online at Real Joel Copling on Twitter, J Copling on Letterboxd. You can write my reviews. Wow. You can read my reviews at joelonfilm.com. By the time y'all are probably listening to this, I should have reviews of Escape Room as well as 3 holdover reviews that I just kind of procrastinated on a little bit, but they're done now. Shoplifters, If Beale Street Could Talk, Vice, movies that factored into my top 10 of the year. And you'll also be able to read my written version of the best films of the year, which will include all of the honorable mentions that I didn't really get into on the episode. So, you should be able to do that. And you'll also find some of my writing at dallasmoviescreenings.com. And, that's where I am on the old CompuServe. I'm just kidding. Internet. All right. Well, Chase, take us out, sir.
Yeah, so, if you guys like this episode, like I said, please spread it around. Let's please grow, this year, because that just shows us that we're doing something correctly. But if we are messing up, please let us know. That's what we like about you guys. Just you can always communicate with us and talk to us. I'm friendly. I know Joel's not, but just don't talk to him from the hours of like 12 a.m. to like 12 a.m. So like for 24 hours like per day, you cannot talk to Joel because he gets cranky. But if you want to talk to me, that's totally fine. So this has been episode 262. Join us next week for 263, where we talk about The Upside. But this week we talk about Escape Room. Let us know about all your thoughts about that movie or whatever we talked about down below. And we'll see you guys next week. You guys are awesome. Have a good night or good day or whenever you're listening to this. Peace out.
Bye.